You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. I'll tell you guys what I told you that I was going to be looking nicer. If you're watching the video streams right now that I have up, we're filming some B-roll for a commercial. It's going to be on BAY, and I showed up yesterday in a superhero shirt, not shaved and with hair just all amuck. So I've cleaned myself up over the course of the last 24 hours and will be presentable going forward. I promised you guys that. Hopefully, you guys have found a way to stay dry. The last 48 hours have been obscenely wet. I heard Steve Balon mentioning that I don't want to misquote him. We're either already there or we are on pace for the wettest month in Green Bay history, just realistically based on the last 2 days worth of rain that we have received in the area. Speaking with one friend of mine, they had their ceiling come in a little bit on the apartment that they rent. My apartment complex, although it wasn't my apartment specifically, ended up partially underwater here. I know there's plenty of you guys listening that were negatively impacted in that in some way. Um, I very rarely focus on weather-based events. Obviously, we will be updating you if anything were to come of this going forward as the fog continues to let up, and you can see in the different video streams we have going up, it is starting to become a little bit more visible out there relative to what it was like when I was on the road just a little bit ago. But it is a bit nuts out there still, so please do be careful while you're driving. And try to stay dry here as we get through these rainy days. It is not over yet. We've got projected thunderstorms both today as well as Friday, so be wary of that as we roll along here. There's so much news going on in the day. That it almost is impossible sometimes to determine where it is to start. I oftentimes joke with you guys, and you will all let me know and say we really need 2 more hours. And I'm kicking around the idea of starting a bit of a live show that I do separate of Woodward in the evenings, maybe for another hour. I'm not there yet, but we might be doing that in the near future just to try and squeeze as many of these stories as we can in throughout the day. There's one story that I keep pushing away because really it's to do with Wisconsin, but I don't want it to sound like I don't think it's very important that we discuss it. And now that it seems like we're in the aftermath of it, I think it's worth talking about this in a meaningful way. We had 2 expulsions from Congress over the course of the last 48 hours as a result of like for me to say sexual harassment, it would be downplaying exactly what some of these people in Congress actually were deciding to do to women that either were part of their staff, were interns, were involved with them in any kind of way. This, of course, being Eric Swalwell and Anthony Gonzalez. I call him Anthony Gonzalez because Tony Gonzalez, obviously, there's a more famous Tony Gonzalez. And I think it's important to distinguish who we're talking about here. We're talking about the person in the house in Texas, the person who um, um, was in and of I don't want to spread rumors or talk about things in way, but it seems the way things are playing out was involved with a staffer, and the way things trended with that staffer ultimately resulted in them taking their own lives. Now, it's good that this person is out of office. Eric Swalwell, who it seems as though nothing has been confirmed yet, although based on the prevalence of the accusations, the detail of the accusations, and the way a lot of the women are talking about what took place, seems fairly cut and dry as well, although it is professionally responsible for me to say. He has said that he denies any of the accusations against him right now, whereas Anthony Gonzalez has admitted to what we have known to be true. In my gut, do I think Swalwell's just as guilty? Probably. Probably. And that's probably the worst part. And allow me to explain why. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going viral right now for a video where she highlights that we all knew what Anthony Gonzalez was guilty of in Texas prior to this week. It was known. He admitted to it. He copped to it. He said it happened. And yet, for more than a month, still maintained his position in the House. And she was highlighting that it's disgusting that somebody can stay in power because of a math equation, because based on what the Conservative Party needed, they needed him to stay in office, even though he was admitting to particularly heinous accusations. And she's right. She is absolutely right that that is the case. Conversely, when you listen to people talk about Eric Swalwell, it is only just coming out now, but you hear rumblings, and it's comparable to certain rumors you hear about Lindsey Graham, or certain things you hear about other politicians, Nancy Pelosi's insider trading. It's like a very not well kept secret that Eric Swalwell, apparently, according to people on the Hill, was a shady, shady dude. This was known for years. And it seems as though an agreement was struck in terms of assault against powerless women that, okay, we'll take one of yours, you take one of ours, and we'll move on. Now that it's even, we can push for the obvious outcome that should have been taking place to take place, now that we will not disadvantage one party or the other. And Democrats are trying to wear this as soon as we found out Eric Swalwell was doing it, we got rid of him, which to the masses is absolutely the case. But as more stories come out, it seems as though this was well known. And the only reason it's being brought to attention now is because he is currently embroiled in a fairly competitive governor's race in California. And it made its way to the limelight now. He's already stepped down from that election, and he has resigned his seat, as has Anthony Gonzalez. This is a net positive, by the way, now that they're gone. The actual story, and that's going to be a theme throughout the show today. The actual story is good, but of course, the only way outside the box knows there are absolutely negative elements to this story. For those of you that don't have a sickness like I do, I have been following along with the California governor's race for a while, and there are 5 candidates, 3 liberals and 2 conservatives. And the way the primary system works in California is it's a jungle primary. What that means is the top 2 vote getters are going to come out of the primary no matter what party they represent. And with people frustrated with liberal politics mixed with 2 conservative candidates that are capitalizing on that frustration, you have 5 candidates who are all polling at relatively the same percentage. So while not likely were the candidates to stay the same, the 5 candidates that were in, including Swalwell, there's a chance the 2 conservatives could come out of the jungle primary in California because the Democrats were all we're all cannibalizing one another's voting bases. Well, that's not an issue that the Democrats need to worry about anymore, because it looks like these accusations that are being described as a very not well-kept secret have now come to the limelight, and Eric Swalwell has dropped out. I am not bitter about this. He should be gone. He should have been gone months ago if people knew this back then and were sitting on this information, which is seeming to be more likely the case. So it is just yet another example of Republicans objectively being worse because they could not hide their scandal. We've known about Anthony Gonzalez for weeks, if not months now, and it is abhorrent that Republican leadership did not call for him to step down the moment this story reached the public eye. But it also is disgusting that Eric Swalwell was able to continue operating like business as usual. As recently as the Pam Bondi hearing, I'm pretty sure he was the one doing the questioning when the Dow right now, when over 50,000 soundbite became popularized. As recently as that hearing, he was still a liberal darling in the eyes of many centrist Democrats. What have we actually learned since the MeToo movement? MeToo, while obviously an issue for decades prior to it coming to the limelight, really took hold in 2017 and 18. We are now almost a decade removed from that movement. And what have we really learned? Because, yes, it is good news that these people were removed, and both parties are going to provide you with the explanation for why they believe what they said is the right way to do things. But what have we really learned since that time period? Because it says to me that we still are okay covering up for this stuff as long as the majority is slim enough that we need all parties involved. We can't kick people out because we are too close to the border. And while it is obviously true with the Conservative Party, there are enough pieces of this puzzle to put in place that it seems pretty disgusting from the perspective of the Democratic Party as well. There are two less people accused of awful actions against women that were able to move far too far along in their careers before their comeuppance came for them. And I'm glad we got to where we did, even though it seems like it took a while. It'll be like when we inevitably tax billionaires at the right level. More on that later. I'll be thrilled, but I'm also going to be like, how did it possibly take this long to get here? I'm looking forward to that eventual outcome. But in the moment, I find myself almost feeling disgusted watching all of these people twist themselves into knots to A, pretend like they didn't know what was happening behind the scenes, and B, pretend like one party was somehow acting in a better way than the other one. I felt like this was the best place to start because this story has been circulating around the news since Sunday. Normally, I'm ahead of the news. This one, I'm a little bit behind on, and it's because I am always sketched out. When people are involved in an election and these kind of stories come out, I'm always a little off put because the timing does matter. But at the same time, with how much evidence has been presented just over the course of the last 72 hours, let alone, the entire time these people were in office, I don't think there's any way to circumvent what is the objective reality in this story. Yes, the Tony Gonzalez story is more despicable. The outcomes are more dastardly. And the fact that Mike Johnson didn't call for his removal until it was politically expedient kind of sums up why people are giving up on politics in general. But the Eric Swalwell story is just the Democrats in a nutshell. Are they as corrupt as Republicans? Probably not. But there's no way to know because they're much better at hiding their stuff. Republicans wear their corruption on their sleeve, and it's very easy to point to, and they just know that their supporters will ignore it, regardless of how flagrant it gets. What's that? Donald Trump created a cryptocurrency, got a bunch of morons to invest in it, and then immediately rug pulled them the moment they did. Oh, well, was Hunter Biden involved? Let's move on. There's an easier way for them to get away with it, and I understand that. But this is why people are fed up with politics. It's why they don't see an outlet. They don't see themselves represented in politics. Disgusting story that has a good ending, but it's a shame. It's a shame that it took this long, and it's a shame that it took a tit-for-tat nature for people to be on board with it in positions of power. And that's all I have to say about it. I'm not going to expound upon it any further than that, but disgusting story, just another example of how egregious the people in power behave in this country while we watch them prosecute the Epstein list, right? No wonder we can't get anybody indicted off of that list of consequence, because look at what goes hidden in politics until it makes sense to not say anything yet. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Good morning, Ben. Cynthia in Florida. I have been feeling what you're feeling, and I've been kind of quiet the last few days because I'm so disgusted. And I saw something trending on X today, and it was about good Americans. And everybody's complaining now, and I'm thinking, how good were you all of the years when all of these things were done by both parties to all of us, and you chose to attack somebody who was getting something you weren't getting and ignoring everybody else that was robbing us blind?
Right.
None of these people were good Americans, in my opinion, because they didn't pay attention. There was somebody that was talking about being bankrupt now, because of medical bills. And one thing in the screed, he said, we were minding our own business. That's your problem. It's not just your business. It's everybody's business. You weren't concerned about how somebody lesser than you was going to make it or not. And now it hits home. I'm unsympathetic.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, Cynthia, and I have always found like that's a fairly American attitude. The it's none of your business, put your head down and kind of keep walking. And that's how to your point, that's how these kind of actions are able to propagate, is a lot of us feel like it doesn't impact us. There's a ton of people out there that don't have cancer right now, that don't understand why I do so many Medicare for all stories, and then they'll get cancer and be like, why isn't anybody talking about how expensive it is once you get cancer? And it's because it's not directly impacting people in that moment. And this just seems like another one of those stories with much more disgusting outcome, obviously, but the principle still holds true. And but like, what's the special sauce? How do you get people to view it as their problem when they see it as something that's never going to impact them?
People are in tribes. There's certain people you're not going to be able to reach out to. It's just not going to happen.
Sure. I feel you. I feel that.
And it's a shame. Bill Hillary talked about a village. Well, we didn't have a village when she was running around.
Yeah,
we don't have it now.
I hear that. Hey, I appreciate the call, Cynthia. You take it easy. And I think she's exactly right with her assessment on the matter. I've got nothing else to add to what she's saying. That's how this stuff is allowed to continue. And let's be real, there's an element of professional ladder climbing as well. Like, let's be honest. I say it all the time. The industry I'm in is incredibly competitive. I remember there's a woman, far right woman. You guys, most of you wouldn't be able to stand her. Her name's Rose. She was a part-time talent. She used to be full-time back in the day. Fills in for Sean Hannity, and she would fill in at the radio station that I used to produce for. And she was used to dealing in conservative media, a lot of dudes that didn't necessarily have the highest of opinions, especially in like the 90s, about women in the position, right? I guess as long as you were cute, it was fine. But obviously, I was working with her well into her 50s at that point. And while I don't necessarily adhere to that belief, let's just be honest, there's a certain element of dude out there that's going to look at you a certain way when you're 22 compared to 52. And she looked at me after the first day, knowing dang well that she and I did not agree on just about anything. And we had a very good time working together the days that she would fill in during my full-time producer shift. And she came up to me after the fact and she said, it was so refreshing working with someone like you. I can tell you're not intimidated working with women, and that's so refreshing in the media industry, because most dudes in my line of work probably look down at the ground, keep their mouths shut, and don't know how to interact with people of the opposite gender for reasons that I'll never particularly be able to relate to. But I can only imagine, if that's what it's like in media, what it's like for people in politics on a regular basis. You have to close your eyes, pretend you don't see what you're seeing, and move forward. It's very strange. But just disgusting behavior. We're going to pivot into the conversation about how to address some of these shady people. Wisconsin considering ranked choice voting and shooting themselves in the foot. And I'm going to read some of the YouTube chat here, because I can see some people jerking me around saying that even though I am looking spiffy today, I'm not wearing a tie. So I'm gonna bring some of the more funnier comments, add some levity to this show here, as I am wont to do. Before I do that, DSL saying, we have learned that everyone who voted against releasing the sexual assault payout info should be assumed to be guilty, and they are blackmailed to being useful idiots by parties or higher ups. Julian Assange was right. 98% of Washington will fall when the truth comes out. I think that's the most accurate statement you've ever made on this show, DSL, and I absolutely love where your head's at with that. And I think you're spot on with your assessment as well. The only people that don't want to see these things come to light are people that will see their own actions come to light. I don't think that's a coincidence. And I realize in America you're assumed innocent until guilt is proven, but I'm not a court of law, so I'm not beholden to those rules. Jacqueline says, I can't learn anything with only seeing no change at all, comparing the past to the present, and will this situation make a difference either? It won't. It absolutely won't, because the next time another person is accused of it, I mean, hell, Donald Trump is pretty credibly accused by quite a large number of people. He was found guilty civilly in one instance. Very little movement of people actually caring, because they'll just turn around and say something about Bill Clinton. They'll what about their way into another conversation there. We live in a society where, as long as our team is doing the thing, we will not ask for any type of accountability, ultimately leading to the other team being able to say, well, why didn't this happen to this person? And they'd be accurate in that assessment. It's an incredibly frustrating situation for a guy that does a show that just highlights that everybody sucks. With that, we're going to take a look at one way that we can handle these types in Wisconsin here, and why we have a chance to right this wrong, assuming the Appleton Council makes the necessary moves. We're going to be playing Landon Moore's reporting during the program in the next segment here. You guys should be interested in hearing what's being floated, at least on the municipal level, with the chance of taking it statewide. I think you guys are going to enjoy this quite a bit. Anyone who wants to get their thoughts involved, 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Come join the party. We absolutely welcome any thoughts involved. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes, guys. Outside the Box, WHBY. You know what's better than Googling a plumber and hoping for the best? Checking the reviews and seeing your neighbors already trust and love them. Roush Plumbing has the Google reviews to back it up. Fox Valley homeowners are raving about the fast, friendly, reliable service. And here's something you don't see every day: a free text line to a real plumber. Got a question before you schedule? Text it. Sometimes that's all you'll need. And with spring rains coming, don't wait to make sure your sump pump is ready. Call or text Roush Plumbing, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. Find that free text line at timroushplumbing.com. Being told I'm bringing the spiffy on the YouTube chat right now being asked why I didn't bring a tie. Let's not go crazy. It's still radio, all right? Let's not put the cart before the horse. You know what's funny? Shout out to the people Political Voices Network. When they picked up the show, I was like, all right, I got to look presentable every day now. I got to really bring it in a way that's going to make me more appealing to an audience that doesn't have the same connection to me that so many of you in the Fox Valley do. And that commitment lasted all of about 3 days. And then I was like, you know what? Batman shirt. we're we're back at it, ladies and gentlemen. And you can't help me. Leopard can't change his spots. Zebra can't change his stripes. I am what I am, as Popeye used to say. He's one of my role models. But I am looking a little decent today. We'll see how long I can keep it up this time. At least 24 hours. I can guarantee you that much. I appreciate the levity there, guys. A little bit of a lighthearted nature for something that's pretty difficult to deal with. As Old Lib highlights on my YouTube channel, no morals in politics. Subscribe at Ben Cominos, by the way. That's just Ben Cominos, Dominoes with a C. Every subscription helps. Go ahead and find me. Just search me on YouTube right now. No morals in politics. I make the rules, but they don't apply to me. You get the representative you deserve. And you're exactly right. Brian out in Fremont with a similar attitude. Exactly, Ben, about what about the negligence, the hypocrisy, the greed in politics is disgusting, and worse yet, disheartening. It makes you want to step away. Like I said, do a Carlin-like step back and watch the circus. And as I've highlighted, as somebody who does this as a career, there is an element of almost kind of putting yourself above what's going on in the world of politics, because it's kind of hard to stomach for anybody who really puts themselves in there. And I'm a millennial who views this from the perspective of having a parent that may need elder care when I talk about elder care, who may have children one day when I talk about child care and making sure that schools are adequately funded and staffed in a way that makes sense. By the way, I'm not going to get into it today, but I went down a rabbit hole of teachers that care about their profession running into a brick wall trying to convince students to actually care about what they are teaching them. I'm trying to find a way to turn that rabbit hole into a segment, but it's not going to happen today. But it's an interesting conversation to be had nevertheless. I do this story knowing that it could impact me. I often joke with you guys saying I've paid off my student loans and I own a home. So not all of these conversations impact me. But the fact is, sometimes you have to remove yourself from the stories. Otherwise, the overwhelming nature of them can grow to be a bit much. And I really do want to say to the boomers in the audience who put up with me sometimes bashing the generation a little bit, for the people in the audience that get it, that understand the kind of things that I'm talking about, like there's an appreciation for people in your world that I think goes unsung, because it's very easy to look at everything you've done with a life that's close to double what I have experienced in life and be like, just grow up and find a way to get around. It would be very easy to find yourself falling into that trapping and talking that way to people that do a show the way that I do it. And to the people that truly get it, like Brian and Cynthia and so many others that it would take me too long to mention on this program. It doesn't go unnoticed by me. But let's get into a conversation here. In Wisconsin, yeah, Brian says love the boomer love. No, it's real because I went and spoke to the Green Party on Saturday, and I even mentioned, I was like, just so you know, the show's not as uplifting as this speech is, and I'm hoping to get that speech uploaded to my YouTube channel later on this afternoon. So if you'd like to see the way I talk when I'm not in front of the microphone, you may want to check that out. It'll be on my Ben Cominos YouTube page. But I wrapped the conversation up and I was saying, just so you know, because some of the audience was a bit older, I was like, I do hammer the boomers a little bit. You're going to have to get ready for it. And there was a chuckle, but I don't think they're expecting exactly what they're going to get on this program when they get here, because, AM talk is traditionally wired a different way. But so in Wisconsin and in Appleton specifically, there is a conversation about ranked choice voting. Now, I could lay it out there for you, but the only reason I know this is happening is because our local news anchor, Landon Moore, has been doing a rap about this throughout the day. And I figured it would make more sense for me just to play you his audio and hear the way he is describing ranked choice voting. Before I do that, allow me to just explain to the uninitiated The way ranked choice voting would work, because you're talking to a guy who thinks the two-party system has failed us, that the duopoly represents two sides of the same coin, not interested in impacting our lives in a positive way, or at the very least in a major positive way that can be felt and address the shortcomings of a crony capitalist system with essentially crumbs left for the rest of us. The way it would work is you are allowed to rank your choices. You are not required to rank anybody. So when you're voting for president or whatever, let's say RFK Jr. might have been your candidate of choice, but you were low-key a Trump guy or low-key a Kamala guy. You wouldn't want to vote for RFK Jr. because in your mind, that would be throwing your vote away, because clearly not enough people were going to vote for him. What ranked choice voting would allow for you to do is vote for that person, and if they win, great. If they don't win, or they don't even come close to receiving the majority of the votes, whoever receives the least amount of votes, which would in all likelihood be in 2024, the third party candidate, that pick is removed and it goes down to your second pick. So if you were a Trump person, you could say RFK Jr., he gets 10% of the votes. Okay, that's scratched. Your next pick was Donald Trump. Your vote still goes to Donald Trump, but you still had the capacity to vote for who you believed actually represented your values the most. This would be a good way to introduce multiple parties and allow for a little bit of differences between the kind of candidates you vote for. As I've highlighted, with Democrats, it feels like you're just voting for different flavors of the same bad ideas. And Republicans in the Trump era, in 2016, Trump felt like a breath of fresh air to Republicans. In 2026, it feels like everybody is either parroting his lines or immediately getting expelled from the party. Do you see what he said about Riley Gaines 2 days ago because of the Jesus picture? I freaking loved it. He just completely disowned her immediately because she had the audacity to say maybe the president shouldn't post a picture of himself looking like Jesus. But nevertheless, with ranked choice voting, it would allow for those differences in opinions. I'm going to play now for in an area in Appleton, which has kind of embraced outside the box. If you haven't heard, we're the highest rated talk show in the market. They've embraced the idea that the duopoly has failed. Listen to the way some elected officials are talking about that, at least on the municipal level.
A resolution asking the state to allow ranked choice voting in municipal elections is gaining no traction with the Appleton Common Council. Alder Adrian Stansel Martin introduced the measure, saying ranked choice gives more options to voters.
It's designed to ensure that elected officials reflect broader support from voters, rather than simply a plurality in a crowded field. It is true that ballots may become inactive if a voter chooses not to rank additional candidates, but that is a function of voter choice, not voter exclusion. Every voter has the opportunity to rank as many or as few candidates as they wish.
Alder Sherry Hartzheim says Appleton residents definitely do not agree on the need for ranked choice voting.
I don't feel like it's a good idea for us to say the city of Appleton likes ranked choice voting and would like to express to the state legislature that it should be changed or that it should be allowed.
The City Safety and Licensing Committee unanimously rejected the ranked choice resolution. It will still go before the full Common Council tonight.
This is a microcosm of what we struggle with every single day in politics. There is a desire for it. Now, don't get me wrong. I saw the ballots last Tuesday on Election Day. I know what we were all looking at. I saw that there were multiple races where only one person was running, and the idea of needing more picks for one person is a laughable assertion. But the concept of statewide ranked choice voting needs to start somewhere. The idea of getting this on the ballot somehow, it needs to happen if it's going to be able to spread in a meaningful way. People are no longer disillusioned into believing that they are more represented by one party or the other. As I stated multiple times over, right now, Republicans are looking down their noses at Democrats, much like Democrats were doing to Republicans in 2021. Republicans are trying with every fiber of their being to pretend like there is not a separation between people that know what Donald Trump is doing is inherently not America first, and people that don't care that what he is doing is not America first, because secretly they just wanted tax cuts. The Democrats are dealing with the same thing. Am I pro-choice? Absolutely. Am I pro-union? Absolutely. Am I pro what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were doing? Absolutely not. At least not the entirety of it. Some things they were doing was fine. Other things they were doing left quite a bit to be desired. There are better candidates out there that more represent what I think I identify with as a politician. And the only way to bring these people to the light is to allow for us to feel comfortable voting for them. There's a freaking third-party voting joke in a Simpsons episode from 1996 where they joke about throwing your vote away voting for Ross Perot when two aliens are running for office. That is a almost 30-year-old joke, and the same principles then are applied today. And we are seeing the Appleton Common Council and the parties involved here in this story show a lack of interest in what I would argue is something that the overwhelming majority of people would like to see once it were adequately described to them. It's why both Republicans and Democrats try and present it as uniquely confusing. It's gonna gum up the works. It's not going to allow people in order to carry themselves to vote in the way that they want to. There's going to be votes lost. It's not as complicated as they want you to make it seem. I took 2 minutes and described it live on a radio show. You don't think a 5-minute explainer by somebody more qualified than me might be able to get this information out there in a way that the average person might be able to understand? I realize the education system in this nation leaves a bit to be desired, but I just don't think so little of the American population that they can't grasp a very simple idea of ranking things. Who do you think has the most likely chance to win the Super Bowl? Who do you think has the second most likely chance? Good work. You just figured out how to rank things. Now do that with politicians. I don't think we're as stupid as they want us to believe that we are. And one thing I know for certain is when you see the previous story we talked about with people from both parties being thrown out of office as a result of sexual assault and sexual harassment, but only because it was politically expedient to do so, I think we've highlighted enough examples of a frustration with a politics that does not represent us. You know how you get it to represent you? More options. And ranked choice voting represents more options, which should be a good thing. You got 57 different types of Oreos that you can choose from, but what? You're afraid you're going to be overwhelmed by too many good candidates to pick from? Get out of here. Hal says, do you think a proportional or parliamentary system would be a better system? They all have their strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to be talking later in the 10 o'clock hour. If you guys haven't seen, Virginia and a handful of other blue states are moving to try and essentially eliminate the Electoral College in a way that's going to absolutely give fodder to the election rigging conversation, but more on that later. But I don't hate the system. I've actually talked about this with Arnold Schober on a Professor's Wednesday long while ago. If I can remember, I might pitch bringing that up again with them in the near future. But there's definitely some good with it, especially given the fact that some European nations have double-digit parties that you're voting between. It kind of allows for all walks of life to be represented in a way. But fundamentally, what ends up happening, Hal, is the similar-minded parties end up forming a coalition, and it basically just congregates into two parties again, but with a bunch of different names. There is no perfect solution, but what I do know is people here are absolutely not feeling represented by either party. Ben, caller Ben messaged me yesterday and said, don't call it MAGA, call them traitors, because this isn't anything America first coming out of this party. And I'd argue that the entire basis of Outside the Box was spitting directly in the face of blue MAGA. So, like, I get your point, and there could be some solutions there. But fundamentally, I think the issue isn't the system. I think it's the money. I think it's the money in politics, and I think until you undo Citizens United, it's going to be an issue. And that, to me, not to give Democrats free advice, you guys should probably pay me for this kind of stuff, but they being Democrats, should run on packing the court. They should say, we're going to make the Supreme Court 13 justices instead of 9. Not in favor of something about January 6th or making sure that Donald Trump goes to jail, but in favor of undoing Citizens United. saying we're going to find some judges that understand that corporations are not people and we're going to undo Citizens United. And I would defy somebody to say that that's a bad idea, because that's what's fundamentally breaking these systems. Corruption has always been in politics, but it feels like the decisions being made these days are directly opposed to any type of positive outcome for people. Very rarely do you get the positive outcome coming out of politics. And KG out in Houston says, so that one lady interviewed doesn't like ranked choice voting, but doesn't say why. Well, to be fair, KG, that was an excerpt from a longer clip. Our news team has to fit news stories in 30-second and 60-second intervals. I can see if I can find the overarching statement, but I'm not going to be able to find that during the show today. That's going to take a minute for sure. But your point is well received, though. And again, that really lends itself to the way we do newscasts in general in America, but that's a much deeper conversation. I would have put a pin in this conversation, but we have to squeeze one more quick break in before we do so. So everybody stay where you are. We'll keep this conversation rolling on the other side. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. We'll be back. Brian out in Fremont's telling me that the wardrobe choice has made my content today more compassionate, open-minded, and positive. He proposes a trip to Brooks Brothers. Well, I mean, find me on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok, Brian, and you'll see I'm looking very fancy today. You know, what's funny is because I'm streaming to all these services, some people that I work with that don't necessarily listen to my show every day are now hearing it, and I don't know if they actually appreciate the show or not. But someone walked past me and went, "There he is, America's hero," and I don't know if that was facetious or real, but I am taking it as real. So if anybody wants to refer to me as that way going forward, I wouldn't hate it. We only have a couple minutes left here. And I do want to highlight because we're going to be spending the 10 o'clock hour with a couple of victories. Unfortunately, none of those victories are going to impact the people in Wisconsin, but it gives us something to aspire to, whether it be as a city, as a state, or as a nation. And ranked choice voting helps us get there. Mike hit me up in the email line here saying, morning, Ben, as someone whose favorite candidate usually finishes about fourth, I am a big proponent of ranked choice voting. Can't remember the last time I really voted for someone and not against the other. I can tell you, when it was, and it was probably when you were a younger man, Mike, because there is an excitement and naivete almost that goes into voting in politics. And I do believe that the Democratic Party capitalizes on that. Republicans managed to figure out how to weaponize it this time around, but it really does. When you boil it down to its bare bones, the two-party system seems almost completely comprised of ginning up as many naive young people as you possibly can, only to then break their hearts and inevitably watch them switch gears. It's the reason, like I'm telling you guys right now, the excitement for young people voting for Obama, they were certain that they were instituting the kind of change that was going to take America to the next level. They were certain that they were ending racism, that nothing bad was going to happen. And as somebody that graduated in 2010, shortly after Obamacare was enacted, I was one of the people that benefited from being able to be kept on my parents' health insurance until I was 26 years old and not needing to worry about it. But what does that ultimately do? It doesn't encourage you to put yourself in a better position. It just pushes the problems that you're going to have with healthcare down the road so that you don't realize it until later, and maybe they can milk you for one more vote before you ultimately end up becoming old and bitter and saying, young people vote for Democrats, but eventually you grow up and vote for Republicans. I understand why people say that. I just don't understand why they think Republicans have their best interest in heart, other than previous generations. As you get older, you actually do accumulate wealth, and maybe in the back of your mind, you think you too someday are going to become that multimillionaire, possibly even billionaire, that's going to benefit from the trickle-down economic tax cuts that the Republican Party seems to enact all the time. But this is why ranked choice voting is universally despised by people in office and mostly loved by the people that understand how it works. Because what Mike is describing, I'm willing to bet, is echoed by thousands of people listening to the show right now through the different sources that we have here. And we have an opportunity to change that. We don't have to accept it for the way that it is, but we have to have the guts to be willing to try something different. Take it from a guy who moved halfway across the country to go and host a show that he didn't know if people were going to like it or not. Sometimes you got to leave that comfort zone and just think that things are going to work out if you truly apply yourself to it. And you'll find that when you do that, it oftentimes does work out. You just have to be willing to shake things up a little bit in order to get there. With that, we got to put an end to this conversation for the first hour. But on the other side of the news, I want to talk about a new tax on multi-property owners in New York. I want to talk about one country that for a full month was able to sustain entirely on renewable energy because they had the guts to wait for it, invest in renewable energy. And I want to talk a little bit more about what's going on in terms of voting in this state and the Democratic Party trying to essentially eliminate the Electoral College. All that and more coming up. Stay tuned. Download the WHBY app, or please do consider subscribing to the Ben Cominos page on either YouTube, Facebook, or TikTok. Definitely would help me out. We'll be back on the other side of the news. All right, we're back. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we talked a bunch about the disgusting nature of Congress right now between Anthony Gonzalez and Eric Swalwell, and how it seems as though two incredibly shady individuals that should have been removed from power long ago only seem to lose access to that power once it became a tit-for-tat kind of situation here. Then we jumped into a conversation about ranked choice voting. This show is broadcast live in Appleton for the people listening that might not be aware of that, and we're kicking around the idea for our area on the municipal level that seems to be meeting quite a bit of headwinds, or pushback, I should say. And I just kind of highlighted, as did a handful of listeners as well here, about the frustration voting within the two-party system and how it kind of limits the kind of change that I think a lot of us would like to see enacted on a regular basis. Now, we're going to switch gears here, as I have one person on my TikTok chat saying there is no such thing as an ethical billionaire except for a former billionaire, and I'm right there with him. I think he's exactly on point with what it is that he mentions there. I told him he's absolutely going to love this show if this is his first time tuning into the program. And that's kind of what I want to jump into here with you guys. Now, it shouldn't catch many of you off guard that I'm not the biggest advocate of trickle-down economics. For sake of argument, now that taxes are in for some of these larger corporations, allow me to just run down a couple because Disney ended up on my radar. Those who know me know that one of my major weak spots in corporate America is Marvel movies. I've never bought anything off Amazon before. I've never shopped at Starbucks before. I have a lot of good things going for me. One of my glaring weaknesses is I cannot get enough of the MCU. They came out yesterday, they being Disney, announcing that they laid off over 1,000 people from their visual effects department. For some perspective, they've turned $8.3 billion in profits, according to their tax returns, paid zero in taxes. So they received their trickle-down economics. They are making more money than ever, and yet, despite all of that, they found time to lay off the people that create the art that is the reason why they make the kind of money that they make. CVS Health, $6.57 billion in profits, zero in taxes. Tesla, $5.7 billion, zero. Citigroup, $4.45 billion, zero. You want me to keep going? United Airlines, $4.3 billion, zero. Coinbase, $1.62 billion, zero. Palantir, remember them? $1.58 billion, zero. PayPal, Yum Brands, 88 companies reported $105 billion total dollars in profits last year, $0 paid in taxes. And yet most of these companies found the time to lay off either thousands, if not tens of thousands of employees, depending on the companies that you are talking about. It never trickles down, and I think it's been made abundantly clear that it also does not lead to job creation. I think it leads to the other thing. Now, this should be a very easy issue to run against, right? And in our two-party system, with one party obviously being in favor of tax cuts for billionaires, that should open a pretty obvious alleyway for the other party to be anti-tax cuts for billionaires. Unfortunately, we do not have that. We have a duopoly where one party says, let's cut their taxes to zero, and says, guys, they need to at least pay 2.5%. Let's not go crazy here. For those of you new to the program, the strongest middle class in human history took place between 1945 and 1983, when taxes were between 70 and 91% on the wealthiest earners. Stock buybacks were illegal, union strength was strong, and antitrust laws were enforced. It does not take a rocket scientist to figure out why we have been trending backwards since 1983 and why our debt and deficit has ballooned since then as well. It's just going to take people that have the guts to say this. One of the most popular people in the Democratic Party right now is Zohran Mamdani, the mayor out of New York. Some of you listening might hate him. Don't care. You're in a minority. It's not relevant to the purposes of this conversation. The fact of the matter is, at a time when the Democrats are uniquely unpopular, while the Republican Party is actively trying, it seems like, to ruin this nation at this point, shows you that people are sick and tired of status quo Democratic politics as it stands today. New York operates at a $12.1 billion deficit in their budget. Now, let's gloss over the fact, even though it is incredibly important, that the NYPD has a budget bigger than most countries' Defense Department budgets. That is probably a relevant conversation to be having in about New York's budget deficit right now. But they are saying, oh, it's easy to spend other people's money. What do you do when you run out of other people's money? That's not the case. What is the case is the centrist blue MAGA governor, Kathy Hochul, is preventing any type of increases on taxes in the name of fears that it will chase billionaires out of the state. Now, I argue that that is a line used as propaganda to convince people not to tax billionaires. But what they are doing in a true liberal fashion is giving crumbs to an issue that isn't going to address the overarching issue. Case in point. There was a major win in the tax the rich camp yesterday. As per Midas Touch, Mamdani secured a deal with Governor Hochul, creating the state's first ever 5 million plus second home owned, ultra wealthy out of state's resident tax. If you've ever heard a Democratic policy in your life, this is what that sounds like today. What it calls for is a tax on all homes valued over $5 million that are second homes for people that use those as vacation homes. I would argue anybody listening to me right now would advocate for a policy like that. It is impacting such a tiny percentage of people while leaving everybody else untouched, and can be used to fund so many of the popular programs that address quite literally thousands of people around, in this case, their city. But as we have highlighted in the state of Wisconsin, the issues that impact New York and LA absolutely also impact Appleton, Wisconsin, just at different volumes and in different ways. But the principles still hold true. Here's why it is uniquely Democratic. Governor Hochul absolutely has stated that she refuses to go any further than that in terms of trying to find ways to generate revenue. They are hopeful. It's not even guaranteed to be this much. They are hopeful that it is going to raise $500 million annually to cut into that budget deficit. The budget deficit of $12.1 billion. So you're going to now have people that are looking for reasons to crap on Democratic politics and say, see, the far leftist doesn't know what he's talking about, saying, oh, they're taxing the ultra wealthy more and they still have an $11.5 billion deficit. What are we pretending that this is actually a way that we can move forward? Because the Democrats won't get out of their own way and allow for bold change to take place. This ties into the ranked choice voting story. This ties into the Eric Swalwell, Anthony Gonzalez story of doing the right thing, not because it's politically expedient, but because it's the right thing to do. His history shows us taxing wealthy people more results in a reduction in the deficit and the explosion of the middle class. It has been borne out time and time again. In Denmark, we've highlighted the homeless problem a half a dozen times there. They built homes for everybody and reduced the homeless population by 88%. That was how they did it. You know what else Denmark just did? They spent the last 31 days, while we were all trying to figure out what we were going to do about rapidly increasing oil prices, because anytime a war breaks out anywhere, our oil prices shoot through the roof. You know what Denmark did? They, for the first time ever, were the first country to completely 100% self-sustain on renewable energy. You know how you are able to do that? Instead of having an opposition party that refers to it as the Green New Scam and trying to undo any type of progress in the renewable energy sphere, they have parties that actually invest in this kind of stuff. They tax their wealthy people and they invest it in renewable energy infrastructure. And while we all are sitting here looking at exponentially increasing oil costs, a 50% increase as it stands right now, and we are not at the height of what the oil costs were. Denmark said, what oil cost increase? They simply just went to the wind and sun in order to address their issues. For specifics, 78% of their electricity consumption was covered by offshore wind, 14% by onshore wind, 8% by solar energy. This is the way that this can operate. This is how we can address this. And of course, the Republican Party stands in the way of that progress. And people that are continuing to vote for them, you need to reconcile with that on your own. But when you see how Kathy Hochul, Governor Hochul, goes to runs opposition towards any type of actual pushback, increases on taxes on the wealthiest Americans in the name of making sure that these policies look like failures, that's when ranked choice voting becomes appealing to people. This is why both Democrats and Republicans push back against ranked choice voting as strongly as they do. Because once these policies are borne out to work, yes, of course, there's going to be people that actively choose to remain ignorant. But if you listen to this show, that means you're pretty up to date on politics. Doesn't mean you like Democrats or Republicans. It means you read up on things and you want to know what's going on. If Denmark can figure out how to address this stuff, we sure as hell can figure it out too. And the fact is, we are brainwashed into thinking that increasing taxes on wealthy people is a form of shame. It's a form of welfare that people should bootstrap, yada, yada, yada. I was sent an article regarding from CBS Newsmax, and I believe the failing New York Times had a similar article last week where polling showed that the majority of people say that they already pay too much for taxes and they're not interested in increasing their taxes any further. You want to know why people feel like they pay too much for taxes? Because their taxes feel like they're continuously going up, whether it's property taxes, wheel taxes, sales taxes, state taxes, local taxes, national taxes, whatever the situation may be. And all we get is a defense budget that goes from $820 billion to $1.5 trillion, and yet you're still going bankrupt from healthcare expenditures, or you're still seeing your home that you've completely paid off, see the cost per year you have to pay continue going up, because there is no interest in actually addressing those kind of costs. If your taxes actually worked for you, if it provided you with subsidized energy, if it subsidized healthcare, if it created a child care program that allowed mothers and fathers to continue working even after the act of giving birth to a child, if it provided the kind of elder care services that doesn't have millennials scared that they're going to end up going bankrupt because it costs thousands of dollars every month to be able to do something like this, there comes a time when you have to step back and say, wait a minute, I might not be in favor of taxes, but what are they trying to convince me that these taxes are even doing? The senator from Montana is on the record. I did not pull the audio, but the senator from Montana is on the record right now saying that they have a record number of people partaking in Meals on Wheels because they are struggling to find access to food. And she herself said, I'll admit it, I'm nervous about this. I don't like the way it's trending. And we are sitting here cutting SNAP benefits and increasing defense spending. This is why we have such a negative attitude towards this kind of stuff. And when a guy like Mamdani shows up and says, your tax dollars can actually work for you, they can work for you. He is smeared as an anti-Semite during the campaign, and they run Andrew Cuomo against him even after he already lost the primary, despite being accused of sexual harassment a dozen times over. And we're supposed to sit there and wag our fingers at the Republicans for not doing anything about Anthony Gonzalez, while the Democratic Party was willing to run somebody like that against a progressive who had the audacity to say maybe billionaires could chip in a little bit, while company after company after company are paying $0 in taxes and allowing for layoffs to the tune of tens of thousands of people if you're Tesla, and a handful of other companies that we've covered on this program as well, and over 1,000 people if you're Disney. Food for thought, I'm sure. We got a caller. Anybody else wants to chime in? I see we got plenty of texts as well. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben. Well, I just don't understand why the Republicans can't figure out the basic strategy of economics is that if the more money that middle income and lower income people have to spend, the more we spend, the more the economy generates and hums. I don't understand why they can't figure that out. It's just such a basic thing. And if they'd stop taking all our money away from us and have the rich pay their fair share, I think we'd be in a whole lot better place in this world.
Well, Cindy, to counter your point, though, I'd argue I haven't met a single person that said their tax return went down. The reason they're able to slide by with this kind of stuff is because regular people end up making an extra $700 a year or whatever it is. And then the billionaires pay $0 in taxes. And then when push comes to shove and we need to figure out what we're going to do about healthcare expenditure or keeping Social Security solvent, they say, well, where do you expect us to find the money? So you're essentially trading an extra $700 to $1,500 now for no safety nets were things to go awry for you. And I think most people in America are too short-sighted to kind of see the negative possibilities because, well, that'll never happen to me. And I think that's fundamentally why it works out that way.
That's what I'm saying, basically.
Yeah, I feel you. I don't know why they don't get it, but I hear you. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, this is Tim. You know, there's a lot to chew on with what you're saying, and it's difficult. I mean, show me a program that's working, and I think people are going to buy into it. I mean, anytime you mention the SNAP or welfare or anything along those lines, it gets a negative spin with it. I think a lot of my friends on the right, they would spend the money if they knew it wasn't going to get abused. And every time the right wants to get rid of a program, they basically say, oh, yeah, waste and fraud and everything else. I mean, show us programs that work.
I'm right there with you.
I think people get behind it.
I'm right there with you. My plan, if Tom Tiffany ever agrees to come on the program, because that's basically what he's centering his campaign on, is waste, fraud, and abuse in different Wisconsin-based programs. And I'm going to ask him, the Defense Department failed 8 audits in a row. Why are you comfortable increasing the budget at the rate that you are? Because you're exactly right. There's an element of hypocrisy here. You have to show that something works. And then once it works, I think people are on board with it. What stinks is that the higher tax rates worked for 40 years, but that was so long ago that people don't remember it working that way anymore. And it's just having someone with enough guts to kind of do so. And I mean, I know you, Tim, the whole wages issue has never been an issue with you at your company. And that's what's awesome is if everybody acted like you did, Tim, there would be no need for some kind of government to get involved with it. But as you know, the larger a company becomes, the more selfish and comfortable they feel taking advantage of their workforce. And I think that's worth highlighting here as well.
Yeah, I agree. And then the other thing, your previous caller just before you, when they talk about tax the rich, I mean, how about this? Just pay your fair share. Instead of sitting here, going with, oh, the rich don't pay enough. No, just pay your fair share. So many people are reaping the benefits of our world, and they don't contribute to it.
100%, because they all get a leg up too. You're exactly right. Tim, always good to hear from you, man. I appreciate the call.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, take it easy. We got one more caller waiting to jump on here. We'll keep it rolling. 920-281-1150 for anybody that wants to chime in. I see the TikTok live chat and YouTube live chat and texts as well are absolutely bumping. We're rolling here. Let's just keep it going. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, it's Anna.
What's up, Anna?
So I just wanted to be a mini representation of talking about the federal tax break that many of us have seen this year, and that me and my family of 4, we did see, I want to say it was like $1,200 extra this year, maybe a little bit more, which sure, great, fine, but the crumbs that is to someone who's paying a family who's paying close to $3,000 a month for childcare. And I know I've said this on air before, and the cost of groceries. There's plenty of things in my grocery cart that have damn near doubled in the last couple of years, and wage increase is stagnant, right? So congratulations on these crumbs. Please stop saying anything for the next 12 months while we continue to tear down the middle class.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Unfortunately, I mean, as you well know in your travels here, people are all in different stages of their life. And when the people, I made the comparison yesterday, people see benefits that are delivered to future generations, not acknowledging that they too received benefits that people from previous generations didn't have, and thinking that those were deserved, not necessarily acknowledging how they benefited. You're seeing people now that have grown kids being like, well, I figured out how to do it. Why can't you? It's a matter of almost keeping up with the Joneses, but in the negative, and being like, well, if I didn't get this benefit, you don't get it either. I don't want my tax dollars going for it. It's a defeatist attitude, and I don't have a solution for it. But what you described is absolutely perfect common sense, and it's very frustrating to say the least.
Sure, and tell Grandpa, like, enjoy your Social Security. I'm actually
Right.
not even coming for your Social Security. I'm asking for people to pay their fair wage and leaps and bounds above what you're making in Social Security, Boomer. So,
And I'm actually
give us
asking
a
your
break here.
Social Security to go up more. So I'm right there with you. So
Right, right. Same team, same team.
exactly. I appreciate the call. You take it easy. And I'm willing to guess Tom here is probably a boomer, because he said, my idea is, instead of whining, how would you fix the problems? Not whining. Easy. I would tax the rich more, as I've been saying for the last 20 minutes. It's pretty straightforward. I'll tell you what, I'm being inundated with comments from like 5 different areas. So what I'm going to do, and we've been talking for 20 minutes. I actually had one person on TikTok say to me, you do talk a lot, because they're not used to it on TikTok Live. And someone said, I think this is a radio type show. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'll take that as a compliment. I'm going to do my best to kind of parse through all these comments. I'm going to find the ones that are most relevant, and we're going to kind of continue diving into this conversation from a number of different perspectives. As Betsy said during the last hour, though, if Ben Cominos can try sushi, Americans can try ranked choice voting. And I think that sums up this entire conversation. I'm going to do my best to get as many of you involved in this program as I can. Sit tight, and we'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. I'll take shows that need a producer for 5,000. Shows that need a producer for 5,000. Thank you, Native Gamer. He's saying I'm on the home stretch. I got this. We'll see what happens. For those of you that are just tuning in or are new to the program, we go 9 to 11 Central Time every single day. Ton of new people in the chats right now, which is absolutely awesome. I'm trying my best to parse through as much of this information as I can. We're going to hit as many of these as I can. If I ignore you, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's because I have a finite amount of time, and there are other things that I want to talk about. But we're going to knock out as many of these as we possibly can. Rod says, please explain to people listening how they get away with paying zero in taxes, because I think many people don't believe me. Here's the problem. The people that don't believe me are in all likelihood Trump supporters, and Trump was able to raise to power on the exact idea that I am talking about today. He would said very famously to Hillary Clinton on the debate stage, yes, I paid zero in taxes, and I was able to do that because of the loopholes you and all your crony friends put in the tax code, and all I did is exploit them. Please understand, I am not accusing anybody of tax fraud. Any of those companies that I listed, I am absolutely not saying that they are breaking the law. I am not saying that they have broken the rules in any way. I'm saying they're bad organizations. I'm saying that they are flagrantly skirting the rules that are put in place by the government. If I took a hot dog and gave it to a German Shepherd, and I said, okay, I want you to eat half of this hot dog, but then I want you to evenly break up all of the rest of the hot dog for the 4 other Bichons that are next to you, and give them each a quarter of the remaining half. And then when I gave him the hot dog, he just wolfed the entire hot dog down. That's not the fault of the German Shepherd. That is the fault of the person who is supposed to put the rules in place and make sure that the Bichons have equal access to the small portion of the hot dog that they are due in order to sustain themselves. So when these companies are paying zero in taxes, they're eating the whole hot dog because our government is just handing them a whole hot dog and saying, hey, make sure all the peons get a reasonable amount of this to make sure that everybody is able to sustain. I understand falling for that logic in 1993. I do not understand falling for that logic in 2026. It has been borne out 4 times over to not be the case. And no matter what major multi-billion-dollar multinational company you point me to, I will show you a company that is probably paying zero in taxes and laid off a crap ton of their employees for no reason other than when a company lays off a bunch of employees, their stock price goes up. As Radiant Antelope says, I love the names on TikTok. Seriously, we have Google and information at our fingertips. People just need to read and check the info. That is absolutely a major component of the conversation. Hal says Washington State just enacted a 1% millionaire tax, which is scheduled to take effect in 2028. Starbucks Howard Schultz is threatening to leave. There will probably be lawsuits. You know what's funny is I believe it's Massachusetts already enacted this, and they've had it for a couple years at this point, and it's been working. I don't remember the exact number of revenue they raised because I'm shooting from the hip right now. But I do know that they've turned around. They've raised a ton of money. None of the people that claimed they were going to leave ended up leaving, and they were able to fund childcare programs and free lunch programs as a result of the money they made exclusively taxing millionaires and no one else. And for some reason, the only people getting mad about it are the people making between $40,000 and $80,000 a year. And I'm never going to understand why it is that they work that way. Doug says out in Meadville, businesses pay wages and those wages were taxed. Take out loopholes to make sure all pay their share. Exactly. And moreover, Doug, to your point, there's a ton of those kind of taxes that I think go over the top. As I've highlighted, Republicans are on this earth to make life harder for poor people. Democrats are here to make life harder for middle-class people. No one is here to make life harder for rich people. And that's why we have so much frustration with taxes. Like, think about it. We talk about Medicare for all in this show all the time. I have never run my own company, but I have worked at enough small, locally owned operations, including this one, to know that the cost of healthcare per employee is shooting through the roof. And as a result, that brings down the kind of wages that you can pay, because even though it doesn't come to you in dollars that you can spend, it is absolutely a benefit to have working there. Every other nation doesn't need to worry about this because they do Medicare for all. And regardless of what study you look at, go ahead and Google it on your own. Go find me a study that says doing Medicare for all will be more expensive than doing it the way that we are doing it for the government, let alone the individual. And short of finding me, two virgins in their mother's basement espouse right-wing talking points, you're not going to find me a trusted publication that shows me that it would cost more to do Medicare for all in this nation. And that includes from a small business perspective as well. Some people just highlighting Tom from the last never mind, this is for Tim. It says, Tim, what about corporate welfare? 1,000%. And that was Tim's point. But for the record, I know Tim on a personal level. He sponsors the freaking show. I know exactly how he's wired, and I don't work with people that I don't think have the right mindset with this kind of stuff. But I promise you, he has the exact same attitudes. We're fine with the welfare going to the billionaires. That's called a subsidy. That creates jobs, although it turns out they end up just canceling those jobs on the back end. Michelle says flat tax for everyone. If 10% tax was levied for the billionaires, I think that would help fund the coffers. Flat tax, while technically just another version of trickle-down economics, but disguised in a different way, it would be better than the 0% that they are all paying now, but it still leaves quite a bit to be desired in terms of making sure that we have the revenue necessary to fill the coffers for the social programs that we need. As one person highlights, just look at the people advocating for a flat tax in terms of the national scene. And that kind of sums up who would be in favor of it there. Not the end of the world and better than the massive companies pay zero taxes that we have today. But I'm also not going to sit here and pretend that returning to the tax systems of yore is ultimately the best solution. Again, cannot stress enough. Strongest working class in human history, strongest middle class in human history was when the wealthiest people were taxed 70 to 91%. And for the record, they still had loopholes. There were still ways to circumvent that. The average percent paid after you account for all that was 56% across all 40 years that I'm mentioning, a 56% tax rate on the highest earners. And they did it, and Americans worked. And when you fell on your ass, you were able to get off of it and get back into work, and it didn't feel like you were forever left on a treadmill that you could not escape. I graduated, as I've talked about before, in the middle of the recession. I graduated from Congress in the middle of a recession, or college in the middle of a recession. I was jobless for 3 months, and I swear to God, that jobless period for me, A, felt like it was a lifetime, but B, it felt like it set me back so much for just having to struggle a little bit. And yeah, there were probably social programs that were around that I didn't take advantage of, but I lived it. You know what I mean? And I think that's important and worth highlighting as well. I have a handful more texts that I would like to get into here. We got a call coming. We'll do the call first, then we'll keep it rolling. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, it's Betsy. I have 2 words to describe why we're in the problem we're in, and those words are Christian nationalism. The majority of United States billionaires, this is a fact, claim to be Christians, okay? A lot of them Protestants. A smaller minority are Jewish, but most claim to be Christian. And most Christians who voted for Trump are supporting, even some of my Facebook friends who don't like the war and don't like some of them are saying, but I'd still vote for them. It's because there's this nationalism, America first, and any candidate who says, we're going to put America first, we're going to be the wealthiest country, it's all about wealth, whatever that candidate that the Christians are idolizing says, that's going to be the candidate they're going to vote for. That's how we got into this mess. And I'm just praying God changes the heart of those people in the next election.
So I absolutely feel where you're coming from, and I know you have a much closer view because you've acknowledged on this program before that you kind of dabbled almost, and you had to kind of realize like this is not the route to take.
Right.
I see it percolating through those. Like, for sake of argument, if I lived in Maine, I think I'd vote for Graham Plattner. And if you're not familiar with him, he was caught with a Totenkopf tattoo. I had not heard of it until the scandal broke, but apparently it was a Nazi era tattoo. And he said, I didn't know that. I thought it was a skull. And he is still polling leaps and bounds ahead of everybody. And I'd argue, Betsy, that we're actually trending more towards yeah, there's a lot of character flaws with this person, but he's saying the things that I want to hear, so I'm willing to look past it. Do you think we kind of, the popcorn's out of the bag on this? Like, can we get back to a way where people think that way? Because I'm seeing it trend more the other way, that there are now people on the left and the center that's like, look, I don't like all of this, but I know what the other person's doing is just nonsense. Do you think, like, outside of the Christian nationalism element, do you think it's kind of pervasive in politics today?
It is. It's pervasive. And again, I'm speaking from a Christian worldview because that's the way I view the world. And I'm seeing that that's the major issue. But there's not going to be a perfect candidate. All candidates are going to be flawed and they're going to, do stupid things, right? But it's the idolatry of Trump right now. People are so blinded. And if they're blinded right now, what if they're still blinded in November in 2 years and Trump pushes a certain candidate and their pastor and Franklin Graham pushes a certain candidate? There's some blind sheep who are just going to follow that way. So that's my concern. I mean, I hope it's not enough to tilt the election, but that's my concern.
Yeah, I think it's a valid one at that. Hey, I appreciate the insight and the call, Betsy. Always good to hear from you. You take it easy.
Yep. Take care.
Yep. Bye. Yeah, always a pleasure hearing from her. I'll tell you what, we still have Brian, Phil, Anna, DSL, plenty of people in the YouTube chat, plenty of people going in the TikTok chat. We'll just wrap up the show on this and we'll save the electoral conversation for tomorrow because it is relevant. So everybody stay where you are and we're going to keep this ball rolling. Just sit tight. You're listening to Outside the Box here on WHBY. All right, we're back. One final segment of Outside the Box here on WHBY before we call it a Wednesday edition. A couple of you guys saying I sound much better than I did the last few days. I do want to highlight, I'm not even joking. It was 1,000 degrees in this studio the last 2 days. They got the HVAC working again. Now I'd argue it's almost too cold, but I don't want to be that guy. It was so hot that like my fingers were swelling and I couldn't really hold things well. And so people were like, you sound like you're kind of spacey. And I'm like, no, I'm melting. I'm physically melting as I'm doing this live program for you. But we're back. We're better than ever. Nothing can stop me now. But so in any event, we're going to roll through some of these last couple of texts here. Phil says, the other day I was complaining to my wife that I used to pay 50 cents for a Snickers bar and now it's $3. I'm 48 years old. Am I just old or is this ridiculous? No, I feel the same way, man. Granted, I have tried to cut candy bars out from a health perspective more so than from a financial perspective, but my favorites are Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, and it's the exact same way. A 4-pack is like $2.50 now. It's obscene. It's obscene. And in my world, a 4-pack of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups is a single serving. It's a matter of, as I've always highlighted, these companies are just feeling comfortable charging more because you're talking Reese's, or I'm talking Reese's, you're talking Snickers, someone else might be talking Twix. Fun fact, I don't know that they're all literally owned by the same company, but a lot of these are all owned by the same company, and they all just have different names. It's kind of like how PepsiCo also owns all the different chips that you buy and things like that. 12 packs of pop, as one TikToker highlights, as Native Gamer highlights here. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the lack of competition mixed with the fact that we all did see mild pay bumps in the COVID era. Nothing to write home about, but there were a lot of increases because people were trying to convince people to show up in the middle of a pandemic. DSL says, my only pushback on the energy consumption in Denmark has around 6 million people. LA County has almost 10 million. Plus, Americans consume a lot more energy per person as a way of life. I just don't think wind or solar is feasible, but it's a good supplemental source. Let's get back to more hydropower. There's waterways everywhere. And I'm right there with you on that. And as I always highlight, you've probably heard me say it, DSL, China generates enough energy to power 25. They can meet 25% of America's output with how China is doing it. So I'm right there with you. It's not like we could stop drilling for oil and gas tomorrow and figure out a way to exist on the amount of energy we could generate in a new renewable fashion. But can't go backwards, but had we been working on it for 20 years and had the infrastructure developed to continue working on it for 20 years, well, I don't think it would feel like as much of a pipe dream as it does right now. But instead, half of our political aisle was like, actually, wouldn't it be better if we just kept doing coal the whole time? Wouldn't that be a better way to do things? And I think that is what's setting us back as the rest of the world is leaving us behind. CEO of, I want to say Ford, again, another story I wanted to get to today, but it looks like this is going to have to get pushed till tomorrow, is pushing for the government to prevent China from being able to sell electric cars in America. You got to love when the free market gets super scared of the free market. But that it just seems like that's one of those kind of stories there. So, like, look, I only have a minute and a half to kind of put a bow on this and make sure everybody subscribes to all my crap. There are examples of the powerful people out there being taxed. There are examples of individuals that want to do it. This show highlights a duopoly in the fact that neither party represents the needs of the overwhelming majority. And what I always find interesting that sticks out to me is that when I highlight that there's a new voice that wants to push back against this, we find reasons to blame the new voice and not the status quo that pushed us looking for that new voice. Whether it's Mom Donnie in New York, whether it's Outside the Box in Northeast Wisconsin, having new ideas and new perspectives doesn't mean you have to change your mind, but at the very least, I would hope they would open your mind to new possibilities that are out there and that we don't have to accept life for the way it is, especially with the kind of revenues and GDP that we generate on a yearly basis. With that, download the WHBY app. All you got to do is search WHBY in Google Play or the App Store. You can catch up on the audio of this program and any other show on this station for free any time of the day. Of course, I also live stream the show on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. You can go ahead and check those out. Please subscribe and follow along. Definitely makes my life a whole hell of a lot easier. And we have to call it a show today, but Haley Tenpass is on next with Focus Fox Valley, and I'll be back tomorrow. This is Outside the Box.